Hello again. I'm just having a sip of a cup of tea. Dry as a bone here. Retransmission and control of amateur stations, part 14. Now, before I go on with that, I did realise that I missed an important section, and that is about making test transmissions. Section 3, Section 8, subsection 3. Now, you don't have to remember Section 8, subsection 3. You don't have to remember all these numbers. You only have to remember the gist of what the regulation says. Now, can you make tests and transmissions? Yes, you can. A licensee must not operate an amateur station unless the content of the signal is intelligible. If the content of the signal is unintelligible, so it's just a carrier, the guys or girls created a carrier to measure the SWR or help tune an antenna or something like that, the signal is transmitted for the purposes of conducting a brief test or making adjustments to the station, which would include the antenna. So you're allowed to transmit without a call sign briefly, to adjust and tune an ATU or to tune an antenna. There is no definition of how long or short brief is, so it's common sense. You know, probably 1 or 2 minutes at the most would be briefly, and you do not have to make an identification during that time, because you may not be able to. The antenna or the ATU might be so far out of tune that you don't want to transmit any sort of real power or any sort of modulation at that time. Then moving down, the licensee must make measures that are reasonably practicable to erect, fix, place and use an amateur station in a way that avoids interference to the efficient and convenient working of other stations. Now, it's unlikely you can have multiple amateur stations at the one location, but this section also applies to where you locate your antenna relative to a neighbour's antenna. So if your block of land adjoins a neighbour and the neighbour's got a TV antenna located really near the fence boundary, you would, if possible at all, move your antenna or locate your antenna away from that as far as possible. In some cases it might mean that you can't do that, and if you're going to mount your amateur radio antenna right next to your neighbour's TV antenna, well, you know there's going to be a problem there. You know there's going to be interference. You know that your amateur transmitter is going to overload that television. It doesn't matter how good the TV is or how good your amateur station is, there's going to be overload of that. So you might have, it's very important to get along with your neighbour and maybe help them shift the TV antenna to another location. Diplomacy is the number one thing here. Okay, retransmitting of stations. Can you retransmit I've got an amateur station transmitting to me, can I retransmit it? If the licensee proposes to use an amateur station to retransmit a transmission originating from another station, a second station, the licensee must ask for consent. So if someone's transmitting to me and I want to retransmit it, I have to ask for consent. Can I retransmit you? The licensee making the retransmission from the second station to retransmit the transmission and transmit the second station's call sign at the beginning and end of each transmission. So if Bob, VK2AA, is transmitting to me and I'm going to retransmit it, I would say, this is VK2DQ retransmitting VK2AA. So everybody knows what's going on. It's fairly simple. As long as you're plainly letting everybody know what you're doing, who it is you're retransmitting, you've got the consent to retransmit them, then you can do it. Section 9 is about the control of amateur radio equipment. There are 5 stations where the operator doesn't have to be present. a repeater station, a beacon station, a station operated in automatic mode, which are a couple of data modes these days. Also packet station, R2TY stations, but also a couple of data mode stations, an amateur station operating in computer controlled mode, an amateur station in an isolated location. Obviously the operator does not have to be there. The licensee must ensure that all times when an amateur station is operated unattended, a timer is fitted to the station to cause it to automatically shut down if malfunction occurs. This is normally called a timeout timer. So let's say a repeater station was to be locked on transmit. We don't want it left there for hours and hours and hours transmitting. There would be a timer fitted so that the repeater times out and stops transmitting after 10 minutes or thereabouts. B, a transmission from the station can be terminated promptly if the transmission causes interference to other services. There are other ways of switching a transmitter off other than a timeout timer. We could have remote control. We could have a remote control link to the station. We could have a receiver at the station that receives a signal, say a DTMF code, which turns the transmitter off. I think that's just about it. Might mention just who a qualified operator is. A qualified operator is not a person with a call sign. A qualified operator is a person with an amateur certificate of proficiency. A person with an amateur certificate of proficiency can supervise another person without a license operating their station if they are licensed. So once upon a time the foundation operator couldn't supervise another person operating their station. They can now. So a foundation operator can supervise a person using their station at foundation level. In other words, they can't go on to bands that the foundation operator can't go on. Same with the standard. The standard can supervise an unqualified person to use their station at standard level, and the same with advanced. Now, supervising doesn't mean taking the microphone off them, announcing themselves and say, I'm passing it to the second operator. There's no such thing as second operator. If you want to use the term, you may, but it does not appear in the legislation anywhere. So if I'm a qualified operator, I've got an advanced call, I've got a station here. If a friend of mine comes around and says, can I use your station and your call sign to put out calls, then they can do that. Then I can do that. So if I have a friend visits my station, he says, Ron, can I use your station? Can I use your call sign? I want to do some work on some contacts on the 20 metre band. I can say, go ahead, Bob, go for your life, use my call sign. I don't have to announce myself, I don't have to interfere, I just have to be here supervising him in the vicinity all the time. So that if he mucks something up, I can do something about it because I'm responsible for the station. Alright, that's enough. I'll see you in the next session, and I'm going to go and have something to drink because I'm getting a bit dry at the moment. Cheers for now.